Okay, so looking at this one, we're going to create this shape, and you can see that we have a center line running through the middle. That just tells me that it is symmetrical on both sides. So we'll notice that when we create this, and that just kind of gives me a preview of using the mirror command. In this one, you also see that we have a hatch that we're going to have to create, and we have all kinds of weird angles and dimensions on this one. So we're going to set up a dimension style and start creating these dimensions. We also have a little weird one, which is here, and we're going to take a look at this dimension, and I'll show you how to adjust your dimensions to look like that. So let's go ahead and switch over to AutoCAD. Okay, so here in AutoCAD, let's go ahead and start with a couple of circles. I'll create a circle with a diameter of 0.5. I'm just going to zoom into that. Next, I'll create a circle that has a radius at the same center as my last circle of 0.56. Next, I'll create a line from this quadrant. I'll turn ortho on and go over 3.5. Then you can see the next one is going to give me the rectangular coordinates. So let's go ahead and type in the x value first, comma, 0.43. So I typed in 1.6, comma, 0.43. And then I'll do the last one, which is a polar method. So I'll type in the distance first, 0.91, angle, 45. Then I'm just going to run this number up to some height, just to make us all on the same page. Let's call that number 2, and then escape. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and put our center line in. And the way we're going to do that is with a construction line. Make it horizontal. Touch this center. So I'm going to track from this center. Remember to get out of that circle without trying to touch any O-snaps. Once I get my tracking, I'll type in 1.5, enter. Okay, so now you see that I do have my center line going across here. Let's go ahead and copy this circle forward. So copy, select your circle. I'll use this endpoint here at the bottom, and then click this endpoint. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the offset command to create this distance. So offset 0.94. I'm going to offset this line going that direction. Go back to offset, and I'm going to offset this line half of the overall distance there, since this is symmetrical. So that will be 0.8. I'm going to offset this line down. I'll go back to offset, and I'll do the back half of this, which is half of the 1.2, in this case, which is 0.6. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom into here. I'll draw a line from this quadrant going up to the second line here. Okay, so let's do a little cleanup work before we go a little bit further. I'm going to go to fillet, radius. It's going to be 0 for this back one. And I'm just going to fillet this line with this line. Back to fillet, radius, 0.25. And I'm selecting this line and that line. Okay, the next thing I need to do is go ahead and put my circles in. So I'm going to go from here and call a circle center radius. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, and I'm going to track. And you'll notice that that circle is going to be even with this one here at the bottom. I'll use offset, type in a distance of 3.3. Sorry, let's go to offset. Distance is 3.3. I'll offset this line to that direction. This will give me the center point of my first circle. So let's choose a circle with a radius at this intersection, 0.4. Next, I'll copy this circle up a distance of 1.6. So copy this circle, Pick a base point out here, and since we're moving at a distance, make sure your ortho is on. Go up a distance of 1.6. Now with this circle, I started liking to use my properties and keeping my properties dialog box open. So go ahead and select this circle. Do a right click while you're on the border of that circle and go to properties. That's going to open up our properties window. With this circle still selected, and you can see that it says circle, I'll go down to where it says radius, click here, then I'll tell it that the radius is 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and start trimming this apart. First thing I'm going to do is trim, and I'm going to start with my lines first. So I'm going to start with this line on the outside and trim, and keep going all the way back until it gets to that point. And you can see this line here is going to stop at the edge of that circle. So let's start trimming this one back to that point. We can go ahead and trim off our arc here on the back. Let's take away our big circle here. So I'm going to trim this all the way underneath. And then I'll trim off this top portion here. This part, I'm just going to trim it right to that circle. And then trim off that portion. Let's go ahead and escape. Well, I should have trimmed these lines off in the front. I'll do it now. Let's go ahead and trim these two off. Okay, now I can go ahead and delete some of these lines. Let's go ahead and mirror this shape, going right across these two endpoints. Okay, you can see both of these lines here are 2 segments. There's 2 ways to do that. To make these into one. First way is if I select both of these and use the join command, and that'll join them together. The other way is to use the Overkill command. And what Overkill is going to do is select and check everything and make sure it's all together. Just hit OK. And you can tell me that I had one overlapping that it did make into a segment. Or it did make it into one complete line. Let's go ahead and create our zigzags for our hatch. What I like to use is a polyline. And I usually turn off ortho and my old snaps. So that way when I create the zigzag, it's not pulling toward anything. I'll do that at the bottom as well. Okay. Let's go ahead and trim. Just these little tabs. You want to make sure when you create these zigzags that you do extend outside of your part. Don't try to stop at those lines exactly. Let's go ahead and turn our snaps back on. Let's take a look at the hatch command. So let's go to hatch. And now I'm going to pick right on the inside of this location. So once AutoCAD figures it out, it'll give you a preview of it. Let's change to ANSI 32. You can see my hatch pattern does change. And that's everything that I need for this one. Okay, next thing I need to do is go ahead and insert in my title block. And instead of using the new insert command, I'm going to switch and use the old insert command. You have to type in the word classic, and you're going to see as you're starting to type it in, AutoCAD will figure out which one you want. Use the classic insert command. With this one you'll get a dialog box. Select the browse button and navigate to where you keep your title blocks. I'm going to put in a B-size title block. Select open. And then OK. When you use that command, I just made sure that I had the insert command checked. The insert point. And I'll show you back in the dialog box. I wanted to make sure that I had this button unchecked. So it put in my title block automatically at 0, 0, 0. One other thing that happens when you use the classic insert command is that all your layers will come in. Let's go ahead and move this to the right location. So I'll use the move command. I'm just going to place this somewhere in the center. Now I did forget to create a layer when I was creating my title block. And I'm going to go back and fix it in my border. So what we can do is, instead of doing that, we can fix it for all of them. The command that we're going to use is called bedit. If you go to block edit, you should get a dialog box appear. I'll select the B size since that's the only block that I have in the drawing, and go to OK. Now inside of this should look like the title block that we created. Let's go ahead and create a layer for our other one. So I'm just going to type in LA, and that just stands for the layer command, or you can click back on the Home tab and select it. Let's go ahead and add a layer. Let's call this one Center. And the color that I'll make it is going to be magenta. No, sorry, not magenta, cyan. Color number 4. Change the line type. And we're going to have to load the center layer that's inside. I'm going to use the one that says Center 2. Then select it. Then OK. Now that layer is created, let's go ahead and close the layer properties. Close the block editor. And it's going to ask you, do you want to save changes to it? We're going to save them. And now if I go back and I check, the layer center should be added, and it should be added to my block for the next time I insert this. Next thing I usually do is that I'll adjust my title block. Right now you can see that the scale X, scale Y, and scale Z is all sitting at 1. That just tells me that my title block is a 1-to-1. It looks like I have enough room around this one. We can tighten this up a little bit if you like, but I'm going to leave it at 1 for this demonstration. Let's go ahead and move the hatch layer, the hatch pattern, to the appropriate layer. So once you click on it, your ribbon will change. Click on the Home tab, select the drop down, put it on the hatch layer, then escape. Next, we're going to start putting in our center lines and center marks on this one. I'll use an old command to put the center points on this one. So I'll start typing in the word center. And the one that I'm looking for is going to be the dim center command. With dim center selected, I'll select this arc. Hit the enter button to use that command again, and select this arc. Next, let's type in the center layer command. So I'm using center layer, one word, and it's asking me on the bottom here, what command do I want to put my center lines on? I'll just type in the word center. What that does is that now when I use the center marks and center line commands and I switch to the annotate tab, is that it's going to automatically put it on the correct layer for me. So select center mark, and then select your circles, and you should see them come in on that cyan color. Let's switch back to the Home tab and use Match Properties. I want you to select one of your center marks, and then select your centers, your center points here. Let's go ahead and put our center line in here. So I'll switch back to the annotation tab, center line. I'm going to select these two lines. What I like to do next is I'll select this center line, I'll select this square, and I'll put it at this midpoint. I'll grab this square and I'll drag it backwards. I'll track from this endpoint and go up to where they intersect or extend and do a left click. Now we have our center lines and center marks in here. Next thing I want to do is go and set up my dimension style. While I'm on this tab, it says use current. This is a dim layer command, just very similar to what we use for center lines. So I'll select the drop down here and I'll choose dim. So anytime now that I use a dimension, it will automatically put it on that layer for me. Let's go ahead and take a look at the dimension style. I'll select this little tab here, the drop down, or you can type D enter on your keyboard. I'm just going to modify the standard one. So I'll go to modify. And I'll come back to the symbols and arrows. That dim center command that we used earlier just to make those small little center points, they only work if this is set to mark and has a distance. When I set this to none, I can no longer use that command again, and I'll show you when I come out of this dialog box. Go back to the lines, and we're going to put a little bit more spacing in our baseline dimensionings. So I'll make this 0.5. Symbols and arrows, we already made our center marks to none. The text height, let's go ahead and make it a little bit smaller. So I'll type in 0.125. Underneath the fit, if I would have adjusted my title block to any other scale, you would put that scale here to match. Underneath the primary units, I have them set to decimal. This will control the decimal spaces. And then OK. Close. Now we're ready to start creating dimensions. Start off with a linear dimension. I'll click this endpoint to this endpoint and place it. Next, I want to continue from this one. So underneath the drop down here, I'll choose continue. AutoCAD will automatically track from the last dimension point I picked, and now I'll select this endpoint. Next, I want to create the dimension on this side. I use a linear dimension, and this time, since that's one continuous line, instead of picking both of the endpoints, if you select enter on your keyboard, you'll see where AutoCAD now will ask you to select objects to dimension. Select this line and drag to the right and place it. Go to dim aligned. So I want to use an aligned dimension. Like I did before, I can select both of those endpoints, or you can hit enter, then select the object, and then move up and place your dimension. Let's go ahead and put the radius dimension on. So I'll go to radius, place it here. I'm just going to kind of move it up just to stay clear from some of my other objects. On the back half here, I'll start with a linear dimension from this endpoint to this endpoint. I'll go and place that dimension. I use baseline, and now you can see the baseline works from whatever line that I selected first, or endpoint that I selected first. It wants to continue from that. I'll go up to this endpoint, and then escape. That baseline spacing that we changed to 0.5 in the dialog box, that's what's controlling the distance between here. And one other thing I was going to show you is that now if I try to use the dim center command in order to make these little points again, AutoCAD is going to say nope, that's invalid because you checked that box and told me to do none. Let's take a look at more radius dimensions. Locate it here, and then I'll do my diameter dimension on the other one. You can see on these that the values are changed or they added some extra stuff to it. What I like to use is usually the edit command. I'll type in ED, and that stands for text edit. Enter, and I'll select the object that I want to change. Once I select this, you can see that it goes into a text editing mode in your ribbon changes. Go to the end of that, and I'll make a ×2. I can close the editor. Another option, since I'm still in the text editor command, you can see that it's asking me to edit more text. I'll go ahead and select the 0.5. I like to use the arrow command to get to the end of it, or you can hit the end button on your keyboard and type in that you have 4 holes. I could have typed in ×4 as well, and that would have been sufficient. While I'm editing text, I'll also edit this one. And make it ×2 as well. Let's go ahead and put our radius dimension on this one. So I'll go to radius dimension, select this arc, and I'm going to make sure that I keep my dimension on the inside here and do a left click. Escape. I want you to select this dimension, go over to your properties, scroll down until you find the word fit, and then where it says text movement, select the drop down, and then tell it to move text no leader. Escape twice to clear that from it. And now if it goes a little jagged, we'll fix that here in a second. I'm just going to double click on the text. And now you can see that this brings me into a text editor as well. So instead of typing ED, sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. I'll get to the end of it, then I'll type in ×2, close the editor, and then hit escape. Now I'm going to select this dimension. I'll select this grip in the middle, and then you see when I move it, it'll put it back in the center and clear it up. The dimension up here at the top, I know that I want to use a baseline dimension, so I'll select my baseline dimension first, which is at this endpoint. Then I'll go to this endpoint. I'll come above and place the dimension. Switch to baseline. Next, I'll select that endpoint. You can see from the drawing that this one is actually on the outside. You can easily select your dimension, select the grip that has the text on it, and move it to the outside. We have a radius dimension here on the inside, so let's go to radius, select it, and keep your dimension on the inside. Let's go ahead and edit that text, so make sure that you're not in any command. Double click on it. In this case, I have a space, so you can hit the enter button to go down to the next line and make it ×2. We have a couple of more dimensions here on the inside. These are linear dimensions. So I can select these 2 endpoints and place it here. And do the same for the other one. Let's go ahead and move this text so it's not in the way of our center line. So select the dimension, select the grip, and then pull it below it. Same on this side, so select the dimension, select the grip, and move it above it. Now that I have both of these selected and you can see the grips are activated, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those extension lines just so they're not covering my shape. So over here in my properties, you can see where I have extension line 1 and extension line 2. both of those are turned on. So if I go and I turn them both to off, you can see that it does clean it up and it takes away those extension lines. The last dimension I need to create is going to be the one with the angle on it. Typically, you should be able to get away with using the angle dimension, but in this case I can't, mainly because I don't have anything to reference this angle to. I can use the angle command and do this, and then place my dimension like so, but if you do want that dimension to be right up next to it, you're going to have to do a little bit of modifying to the shape that you have created in order to achieve that. Let's go ahead and delete this dimension. And what I have to do now is I have to go down to this corner, create a line from this endpoint going this direction, and make sure that it is horizontal. And you can make that line super small. Now when I go ahead and place my angular dimension on it, and I zoom out, you'll see that that is in line with it. What I like to do is that you'll see that I have double arrows. So on this one, I'll go ahead and select that dimension. Over here in my properties, I have arrows 1 and arrows 2. And you can see that when I switch this one off, and I do have the right one in this case. If you're to switch the other one off, just do it with the other one. You can see that this one is switching actually my other arrow. So this is the wrong one. So it's arrow number 1 that I will be adjusting to none. Last thing we have to do is fill in our title block. I like to type in ATE, just like how you ate lunch. Select your title block and then fill in the name. So you'll fill in the name or your name in the first box. The second one is asking me to enter project name. In this case, it's going to be example 1. And then you can fill in the scale. Scale for this one, since we did not adjust it, will be 1 = 1. Then close it. Alright, so now that looks like all the dimensions and everything that I have covered on this one. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I know this video was a little long, but as we start doing more and more things to these drawings, they are going to get more and more complicated. Thank you for watching.